Nobody saw this coming. Not FIFA, not the analysts, not the bookmakers who quietly bet that Mexico would be the quietest, least exciting host of this World Cup. Nobody ran the numbers on this. Nobody predicted that 4 matches could rattle the plans of one of the most powerful organizations in global sports. Nobody predicted that 13 games could generate more buzz, more spending per fan, and more worldwide attention than 50. And nobody, absolutely nobody, predicted that the real star of this tournament would not be a player or even a national team, but an entire country pouring into the streets, match after match, night after night, rain or no rain, ticket or no ticket, showing the planet exactly what this nation is made of. Just a few weeks ago, when the match schedule was released and Mexico ended up with only 13 games compared to the more than 50 hosted across the United States, plenty of people read it as a clear signal. FIFA did not fully trust the country. The thinking went that Mexican stadiums would not fill up the same way, that the economy was not ready, that the atmosphere would not measure up to the moment. Then reality happened, and everything FIFA failed to calculate came crashing in at once. After Mexico beat Ecuador 2-0 with goals from Julian Quinones in the 22nd minute and Raul Jimenez in the 31st, more than 1 million people flooded the streets of Mexico City. That number, 1 million, was confirmed by the capital's own city officials before the final whistle had even blown. The Angel of Independence once again became the beating heart of the football world, lit up by fireworks in a sky painted green, white, and red. The chanting never stopped that whole night. Mariachi bands, foam, tequila, and a party that rolled on until well past sunrise on the 1st of July. It was not just Mexico City. Guadalajara, Monterrey, Cancun, Puebla, Zacatecas, and Oaxaca, cities and states that do not even host a single World Cup match, reported unusual tourist traffic, fully booked hotels, and streets buzzing with life late into the night. Meanwhile, in some American stadiums, entire sections sat noticeably empty. The blocks around those venues cleared out within minutes of the final whistle, and visiting fans headed straight back to their hotel rooms, with no party waiting to pull them back outside. There is no need to exaggerate any of this. International media outlets are already documenting the contrast themselves. What Mexico is doing with this World Cup goes far beyond soccer. In just the first 13 days of the tournament, Mexico's National Chamber of Commerce confirmed an economic injection of roughly $940 million, and that figure does not even include ticket sales revenue. Independent economists at Deloitte now project the total economic impact for Mexico across the full tournament could land somewhere around $2.7 billion, supporting roughly 100,000 temporary jobs nationwide. Hotel rates in Mexico City jumped by nearly 30%. Guadalajara saw increases close to 25%, and Monterrey rose almost 23%. Restaurants across these host cities are reporting sales up nearly 30% compared to the same period last year. Cancun, which does not host a single World Cup match, is packed with fans from every corner of the globe who decided to spend their time between games somewhere they could actually feel the tournament in the streets, not just inside a stadium. And it is not only the host cities. Zacatecas, Oaxaca, Hidalgo, and Puebla, none of which have a World Cup venue, are logging visitor numbers well above normal, with many travelers already promising to return. That is the kind of spending spread that no other host nation in this tournament has managed to replicate. What FIFA never budgeted for was not simply the money itself, but the way Mexico generates it. It is not about how many matches a country hosts. It is about the fact that a fan who buys a ticket for a match in the United States is choosing to cross the border afterward and spend his nights, his money, and his best vacation memories on Mexican soil. Fans from France, Germany, Japan, and South Korea, people who flew thousands of miles to watch their national teams play on American soil, are now booking flights or buses straight to Mexico City, Guadalajara, or Monterrey to wait out the days before their team's next match. The logic is simple. A match lasts 90 minutes, but the celebration lasts for days. And here is the number that really drives the point home. Deloitte's analysts estimate that direct economic impact for Mexico, this tournament, could exceed $4 billion once every ripple effect is counted, supporting well over 112,000 temporary jobs. That figure is more than double what Mexico's Formula One Grand Prix generates in an entire year, an event that used to be considered the country's biggest annual sporting draw. And all of that was built on 13 matches, not 50-something. So the question quietly forming in hallways at FIFA headquarters is an obvious one. What if Mexico had been given more matches from the very start? That question started as a whisper and is now getting louder by the night, growing with every fresh wave of celebration in Mexico City. There is a rumor circulating, still unconfirmed, that football's governing body may be quietly reconsidering how it distributes the remaining knockout matches. Fans across the planet, the same ones flooding social media with clips of the Angel of Independence glowing in the rain, of South Korean supporters dancing shoulder to shoulder with Mexicans, of Iranian fans being welcomed with open arms in Tijuana after being turned away elsewhere, are increasingly vocal that they want to see more of the tournament staged in Mexico. The complaint making the rounds online is straightforward. It does not feel fair that the country producing the most viral, most authentic, most emotionally charged atmosphere of the entire tournament has to watch the final on television, staged instead at a stadium in New Jersey that had never hosted a World Cup match before this year. And the irony gets sharper the more you sit with it. Estadio Ciudad de Mexico, the only stadium in football history to have hosted 2 World Cup finals, back in 1970 and again in 1986, a venue FIFA itself has repeatedly called one of the most historic grounds on the planet, will not host the final of its own tournament this time around. On social media, that frustration has become one of the most talked about storylines of the entire World Cup. How is it possible that the best atmosphere, the most passionate fan base, and the country generating the most spending per visitor ends up with fewer matches than everyone else? Nobody at FIFA has offered a comfortable answer to that question yet. None of this frustration exists in a vacuum either. This has quietly become one of the most politically charged World Cups in the tournament's history, and the noise around ticket prices and match allocation is only one layer of it. Earlier this year, attorneys general in New York and New Jersey issued formal subpoenas to FIFA, demanding the organization explain how it set ticket prices for matches at MetLife Stadium, including the final scheduled for July 19th. Investigators say fans were misled about where their seats were actually located, and that prices for more than 90 of the tournament's 104 matches climbed by an average of 34% between last October and this past April under what FIFA calls dynamic pricing. New Jersey's Attorney General did not hold back, describing the ticketing process as a maze of confusion and artificial scarcity built at the expense of ordinary fans. Then there is the matter of the American president himself. Donald Trump has positioned himself front and center throughout this tournament's buildup, a role that has drawn just as much criticism as praise. Back in December, FIFA President Gianni Infantino presented Trump with the newly created FIFA Peace Prize at the World Cup draw, an award that raised eyebrows across the football world given the timing, just weeks after Trump had missed out on a Nobel Peace Prize nomination. Financial disclosures released at the start of July revealed that Infantino had also gifted Trump 10 tickets to last year's FIFA Club World Cup final, valued at around $15,000, a detail that has only added fuel to accusations that FIFA leadership is cozying up to the American president rather than staying neutral. Critics argue that Trump has effectively been allowed to present himself as the tournament's sole face, even though this World Cup is jointly hosted by 3 countries. Mexico's President Claudia Sheinbaum and Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney have both largely been left out of the spotlight FIFA has built around Trump, despite their nations co-hosting the event, and in Mexico's case, delivering by far the most electric atmosphere of the tournament so far. That imbalance has not gone unnoticed by commentators who point out the awkward optics of the situation, especially given that Trump's own administration has been a source of tension with both co-host nations over trade and immigration policy throughout the lead up to the tournament. The politics have gotten messier still. Earlier this year, former FIFA president Sepp Blatter publicly urged fans to boycott matches played on American soil, citing the Trump administration's immigration crackdowns and foreign policy moves as the reason. Travel restrictions announced by the administration effectively barred fans from Senegal and Ivory Coast from attending matches without difficult-to-obtain visas, while supporters from Iran and Haiti found themselves shut out entirely under an earlier travel ban. That is part of the reason Iran's national team ended up relocating its entire base camp to Tijuana, choosing to train and rest on Mexican soil rather than deal with the uncertainty of entering the United States. It is a small but telling detail that mirrors the larger story of this tournament. Fans, players, and entire federations gravitating toward Mexico, not just for the party, but because it has become the more welcoming, more stable option on this continent for large stretches of the summer. None of that political noise has stopped Mexico from putting together one of the most surprising runs in the tournament. Nobody had Mexico written into the script. As a contender for the trophy, Brazil has Vinicius, France has Mbappe. Argentina arrives with the same hunger it always brings. Spain shows up as reigning European champion. And yet, here is the Mexican tricolor. 4 matches played, 4 wins, 12 goals scored, 0 conceded. Mexico is the first team since Italy in 1990 to close out its first 4 World Cup matches without allowing a single goal. International outlets are already floating, with the same disbelief usually reserved for genuine surprises. The idea that Mexico might be this tournament's most unexpected contender. Not the favorite, exactly, but something more interesting than a favorite, a team nobody had calculated for that keeps turning the improbable into the real. Head coach Javier Aguirre said after the Ecuador match that it was the most important win of his entire coaching career, and he has good reason to say so. Mexico had not won a knockout stage match at a World Cup in 40 years. The last time it happened was back in 1986, also on home soil, with Aguirre on the field himself, except that time as a player rather than a coach. Whatever took 40 years to happen again arrived in a single night, with 2 first-half goals and a defense that has now gone 12 straight matches without conceding, stretching back through World Cup qualifying and into the tournament itself. The next test is England, and it arrives fast. This coming Sunday, back at Estadio Ciudad de Mexico, the giant of Santa Ursula, Mexico welcomes one of the largest and most passionate fan bases anywhere on the planet. English supporters, notably, have also been choosing to spend their downtime in Mexico rather than sticking around north of the border, drawn in by an atmosphere they say has no real equivalent anywhere else in this tournament. If what happened against Ecuador, Czechia, South Korea, Colombia, Iran, and South Africa already stunned the football world, the real question now is what happens when that same million-person crowd that flooded the Angel of Independence collides with the wall of white shirts English fans are famous for bringing to every match they attend. FIFA did not calculate Mexico into its plans the way it should have. The world did not calculate Mexico into its plans either, and Mexico, as it always seems to, is proving that when it comes to football, celebration, and welcoming the entire planet with open arms, no other country on earth does it quite the same way. The plan has already changed, and this tournament is still only in the round of 16. there is a very real chance the loudest chapters of this entire World Cup are still ahead, especially if the rumors about FIFA reshuffling future hosting decisions turn out to have any truth behind them at all. For now, all anyone in Mexico City is doing is getting ready for Sunday, because if the last month is any indication, this country has no intention of slowing down. There is another layer to this story that deserves attention, because it says something about how the politics surrounding this World Cup have started to shape decisions well beyond the pitch. Reports from earlier this year described this tournament as one of the most chaotic and politicized in the competition's long history, with tension between the Trump administration and both co-host nations simmering for months before a single ball was kicked. Analysts pointed out that the timing could not have been worse. Just weeks after receiving that peace prize from Infantino, the American president authorized a special forces operation targeting a foreign head of state, and not long after, found himself entangled in a new conflict involving Israel and Iran. For a tournament that organizers had hoped would feel like a clean, celebratory reset after the corruption controversies that shadowed the last two World Cups in Russia and Qatar, the buildup instead became a case study in how quickly politics can attach itself to the world's biggest sporting event. That backdrop makes Mexico's street-level celebration feel even more significant. While questions swirl around FIFA leadership, ticket pricing, and the optics of a single world leader dominating tournament coverage, ordinary fans in Mexico have essentially answered with a party too big to ignore. It is worth remembering that FIFA's own fan festival numbers backed this up almost from day one. Within the tournament's first week, organizers confirmed that combined attendance at fan festival events had already crossed 2 million visitors. And Mexico's three host cities, Mexico City, Monterrey, and Guadalajara, were pulling in the largest crowds of anywhere in the tournament, according to FIFA's own release. That is not a rumor or a fan exaggeration. That is FIFA's own data, confirming exactly what the streets have been showing every night since the opening match. Some of the loudest chatter online right now falls firmly into rumor territory, and it is worth being upfront about that distinction. The idea that FIFA might reshuffle hosting responsibilities for future knockout rounds, potentially shifting more high-profile matches toward Mexican venues, remains an unconfirmed possibility being floated by fans and a handful of commentators rather than anything FIFA has stated publicly. The same goes for speculation that mounting public pressure could eventually force organizers to reconsider where the final itself gets played in future editions of the tournament. Though nobody realistically expects that specific match to move this late in the cycle, these are threads worth watching, not settled facts, and treating them as anything more than that would be getting ahead of the story. What is confirmed, however, is the growing scrutiny FIFA now faces on multiple fronts simultaneously. Beyond the New York and New Jersey ticketing investigation, media coverage throughout the spring repeatedly flagged concerns from European lawmakers about the appropriateness of FIFA's Peace Prize gesture toward Trump, given his administration's travel restrictions affecting fans and even players from multiple qualified nations. Iran's relocation to Tijuana was not a minor logistical footnote. It became a symbol, repeated across international coverage, of a tournament where the host country perceived as more welcoming turned out to be the one without a single World Cup stadium of its own hosting a final. Mexico has effectively become the emotional host of this World Cup, even in stretches where it is not the official one. And that dynamic is only getting more pronounced the deeper the tournament goes. None of this changes the fundamental football story unfolding on the pitch, and in some ways it makes Mexico's run feel even sweeter for a fan base that has waited 4 decades for a moment like this. A team that nobody circled as a genuine contender before the tournament started is now 4 matches into a perfect defensive record, riding a wave of home support that has turned every match week into something closer to a national holiday. Whatever happens against England this Sunday, And whatever FIFA ultimately decides about future match distribution, one thing already feels settled heading into the second half of this tournament. Mexico did not just host a World Cup. It redefined what hosting one can actually look like, one packed street and one goalless clean sheet at a time. There is also a financial detail worth adding, since it has been circulating in Mexican business press throughout the tournament, and helps explain why so much of this spending has landed outside the three official host cities. Airbnb reported that a striking share of bookings inside Mexico this year, roughly 70%, came from Mexicans traveling within their own country rather than from international visitors, with more than 1 million people using the platform for domestic travel for the very first time over the past year. That detail matters because it shows this celebration is not purely a story about foreign tourists descending on Mexico for the World Cup. It is also a story about Mexicans themselves treating this tournament as a reason to explore corners of their own country they might never have visited otherwise, which helps explain why cities with 0 World Cup matches are still seeing hotels sell out and restaurants stay packed past midnight. Mexico's tourism ministry has offered an even more optimistic projection than Deloitte's, suggesting the total economic contribution from this World Cup could eventually climb past $3.4 billion once every direct and indirect effect gets tallied at the end of the tournament. Independent credit rating agencies have been more conservative in their own estimates, projecting a smaller but still meaningful boost of roughly 0.13% to the country's overall economic growth this year, with most economists agreeing the effect will be concentrated almost entirely within this calendar year rather than leaving behind much lasting infrastructure. Whichever number ends up closest to reality, the pattern underneath all of these estimates stays consistent. Money is flowing into Mexico at a pace nobody projected back when the match schedule first came out, favoring the United States by a wide margin.